manufacturer. And we're here live in the EPRO studio. I'm wearing my work duds. We just got wrapped up with a really cool travel van today. It's a total DIY project with the exception of our involvement. That video is going to go live probably in 4 to 6 weeks. We've got a backlog of great stuff coming at you. We have a Class C RV coming in next Thursday, and that customer is going to go right out the door and boondocking across America. So that's going to have solar panels, charge controllers, batteries, upgrades, shore power, the full meal deal. That's a pretty piece. That RV is well into 6 figures. So that's really fun. We have yet to do a Class A or B. I think it's A, B, C based upon size and weight. We have yet to work on an A or B, but our bay is big enough, so bring them on down because that's the kind of work we're looking for. Well, I'm going to chat through some comments we have here. There's a few comments that just create so much opportunity for discussion, and so I've got Mauro Apercio. Apologize if I butchered your last name. You say, good video regarding our kitchen counter electrical code minimum. Good video, but the outlet has to be 3 feet away from the sink counter wet area. Okay, so there are a couple things going on here. Sometimes it's hard to kind of parse through the comments and get the exact intent. Anytime you guys can drop a timestamp into your comment, that just sharpens up the dialogue that we're having. And so, Mauro, you might be right for your area. And the question is, are we talking about the National Electrical Code? Are we talking about local interpretation? Are we talking about one specific experience with an inspector? Are we talking about a standard that maybe your main builder upholds on the job for all intents and purposes through all their projects? The standards come from a lot of directions, and they're adopted across different code cycles at different times, and there are exceptions that are made. So in Indiana right now, we're on the 2008 National Electrical Code. We are the oldest state in the union! And we've made exceptions, amendments, as a state to the National Electrical Code. And so you're going to get a different flavor. And the question is it safer or is it less safe for a state to make local amendments, right? If the governing body that creates the electrical safety standard for the North America sets forth a standard, what precedent is there for a state to amend that standard, right? I'll tell you what, it could be soil conditions, it could be moisture content in the soil, the type of soil, it could be the conductivity to ground, it could, or lack thereof, it could be the leadership doesn't have an appetite for prevailing technology. If it's just come out, like arc fault circuit interrupters have not been adopted by the state of Indiana. And I'll tell you what, in 2008, there were a lot of nuisance faults, nuisance trips with arc fault circuit interrupters. They didn't seem to be a reliable technology, and I wonder if that's why the state of Indiana put those on hold for, it's going to be about 16 years. The 2020 is not going to be adopted in our state until probably early to mid 2024, and then we'll be up to the second newest standard. 2023 will come out. So Mauro, you're making a good point, asking a valid question here. My interpretation of outlet spacing for kitchen countertops is this: that receptacle outlets are permitted to be located behind a sink in a kitchen. However, they are 210.52. Article 210 addresses branch circuits. Portion 52 says receptacle outlets required by code, the spacing of those outlets, the location, and ampacity. And what I read is, receptacle outlets shall not be required directly behind a range, that's a stove, counter-mounted cooking unit, it's a cooktop, induction, gas, or otherwise, or sink in the installation described in figure 210.52C1. And that code reference I just read is 210.52B1C1 exception. So what I'm reading is it's permitted for outlets to be located behind sinks, but it's not required. However, I will say on that particular point, in kitchens, bathrooms, or wet bars or otherwise, if there is a receptacle outlet behind a sink, you will get inspectors' hackles up because they know that people are going to utilize those receptacles and those cords are going to lay in those sinks. And if there's a fault, it could become extremely hazardous to personnel. However, I will say that that receptacle must be located within 2 feet, 24 inches of the outside edge of the sink in order to comply with 210.52. Now here's the other part, GFCI protection. GFCI protection has been expanded probably every code cycle since the invention of the GFCI. It just, there's more domain within the ruling power of the ground fault circuit interrupter than ever before. For instance, and I appreciate one of our viewers pointed this out to me. I've not spent nearly as much time in the 2020 code as I'd like to based upon Indiana's adoption and local practices, but basements have been dramatically expanded to include GFCI protection, not just unfinished portions of basements, all basements. So how I read that is, if the floor, man, that gets complicated. You could have an inspector approach from 2 different angles. If the local building code has a definition of a basement, and the building, not the electrical code, but the building code defines the first floor of a home as a basement, you're required to put GFCI protection. It could be that it's not being called a basement by the builder, it's not been called a basement by the designer, the homeowner, or anyone else on the job site. But if that floor is below grade level, it may be, by definition, a basement and require GFCI protection. See, a lot of these definitions that impact the electrical code are actually found in other codes, like the International Residential Code. And so building code affects, and the interpretations thereof, standards thereof, affect electrical code. And so GFCI protection has been expanded to include basements as a whole, and not just unfinished portions of basements. Also, here's one nuance of GFCI protection that I've encountered so many times. This conversation with inspectors, particularly home inspectors, not building inspectors. And I think home inspectors have a slightly different skill set, really typically sharp guys. They're well versed across a very wide range of building and facility items and systems. But they'll require GFCI protection within 6 feet of a sink. Maybe yes, maybe no, depends on the situation. You see, in a kitchen, it's all the receptacles. In the bathroom, it's all the receptacles. In other types of wet locations, laundry rooms, garages, basements, outdoors, it's all receptacles. However, let's paint a scenario where you've got a sink in a mudroom. It's just a hand wash sink. It's not in the kitchen or bath, or you've got a sink in an art room or a workshop of sorts. And GFCI protection would not otherwise be required. However, within 6 feet of the outside edge of that sink, GFCI protection is now required. And so that would apply to little niche wet bars in basements, master suites, things of that nature. So watch out for that nuance difference, and I'll give you the reference on that. 210.8 is GFCI protection, and that 6 foot from sinks is 210.8B5. 210.8B5. Guys, I don't know everything, and this is changing dramatically. If you disagree with anything that I said, let's talk code. Let's bring it back to the latest edition of the code, with the understanding that we're going to have a massively wide variety of adoptions, interpretations, and enforcements, as well as amendments. Going on to another comment here. Okay, so John Thomas comments, why are you not using a torque driver to secure wires as required by code at the last 2 code cycles? Like, dang, you're so out of date. Okay, John, you're totally right. I love torque screwdrivers. Probably 4 or 5 years ago, we bought all the guys torque screwdrivers, torque wrenches, so we can torque everything down. We've got extensions, so we can get in tight spaces. 100% with you. Every 5,000 clicks, which we're nowhere even close to that. We need to be calibrating that equipment. 100%. Indiana's still in the 2008. It's not an enforced standard. Although I will tell a story. You may have heard this story before. True story. 2 electricians on the job site. There was a fire that resulted in the total loss of a facility. Thankfully, no lives were lost. And both electricians were called to the stand. This is on trial here now. This is the real deal. This is where none of us want to get. We all buy insurance for this very purpose. And they were both asked, do you own a torque wrench? And one could honestly say, yes, it is here with my equipment. And the other one, the answer was no. It could not be proved whether the terminals were, it could not be proved who performed the work, but the result was the terminals were not properly torqued. There was overheating, it did catch and spread fire, and there was a total loss when you had one person who was positioned for success and one who was not. And the court assigned the loss to the insurance of the party who did not own a torque screwdriver, torque wrench, forget which of the two it was. And so that's big, you're making a completely valid point. I will say that one of our practices is almost universally, and I'll tell you a couple exceptions and I'll give you some business reasons why. We'll almost universally torque all electrical connections. We will not always torque all mechanical connections. However, we do go through some baseline practices, such as we'll find the spot on our like 20-volt DeWalt impacts. And this is a gross generalization. Some of you are going to hate this, but we'll find the spot on our 20-volt DeWalt impact, Milwaukee impacts, and we'll compare it to a torque screwdriver. We'll develop a feel for when I'm securing solar panel fasteners, strictly mechanical. Ooh, man, one more exception there. Strictly mechanical connection. What's the range of applicable torque? On electrical installations, we will typically not torque anything until the job is done. And then one individual will sweep through and they'll clean out the equipment, they'll blow it out with compressed air, they'll get the dust out, they'll seal open knockout or penetration if something's been overlooked, they'll do a visual inspection, and they'll torque all terminations, as opposed to everybody at every step pulling out a torque screwdriver, because a torque wrench and torque screwdriver are slower to use. They're going to take you more time. They're a little bit more clunky. They're heavier to carry. My torque screwdriver does not fit in my Klein tool belt well. It wants to fall out. And so it's a matter of practicality. We've got to respect the cost of labor, and we've got to maintain profitability in every manner that we can without compromising safety. So John, respect your comment there. You always want to bring excellence to every task. So thanks for dropping that in there. The exception to that too, we don't torque common devices, 15, 20 amp outlets, residential, commercial, switches, GFCIs. The failure rate, the risk level is, we deem, tell me a story. If you've got a story, drop a story in the comments. We deem the risk level to be so incredibly low. However, if we're doing like 30 amp twist lock for specialized equipment, if we're doing medical equipment, if we're doing things that have a higher risk associated with them, we're definitely whipping out the torque screwdriver, and we're definitely locking those babies down and going through that extra effort. But I think, as a company, we're not competitive in the market if we've got a dozen or 2 dozen practices that are, what I'm going to say is a little bit over the top, to be torquing down every receptacle outlet in a residential setting. I'd be hard pressed to find a viable business whose electricians are torquing their resi outlets without exception. Oof. I think there are a lot more important practices to be paying attention to that have higher yields. So I'm going to challenge you on that one there. Okay, here's a good one. James Martello. Hey, I really appreciate it. You've been dropping a bunch of comments in here. I feel like I'm starting to get to know some of you. James, on our how to add an external electrical disconnect to your home video, you said that NEC, you are allowed 5 feet from run from the load side of the meter to the MDP, main distribution panel, or first means of disconnect. If the wire is run in rigid or IMC, the inspector is wrong. He is correct, the way the unfused wire is installed. Hey, this one is interesting. Man, I've had so much pain over this one, and just lack of consistency. think I commented in this video, I asked the person I was interfacing with at the building department, I said, I apologize, just for my own information, if this is the first time this standard has been upheld in all of the many projects that we've done in the greater Indianapolis area, should I expect this universally moving forward, or would this be more of a one-off? And the person answered me, he said, every inspector is going to be different. I'm like, no! I don't know how to make money as a business if every inspector is going to be different. I don't know how to do it. Like, I almost wanted to just like throw in the towel and walk away. Like, I'm done, I'm finished. There's no way to satisfy your callbacks and reworks, and there has to be a standard, right? There, even if it's only a local standard, there has to be a consistent standard. Okay, so James, I think that you're probably conveying practical standard that you've encountered across your inspector base in your area. I don't know what the 5-foot run rule is that you may be referring to from the National Electrical Code. I'll tell you the couple of rules that I do see regarding disconnecting means in Article 230.70. General means shall be provided to disconnect all ungrounded conductors in a building or other structure from the service conductors. So everything's got to have a main breaker, it's got to have a disconnect. But from this code, it could be one or the other, it could be inside or outside. That's not yet defined, but it does have to be there. It can't just be a bunch of branch circuits. It's got to be a main. You've got to have a main. Location. The service disconnecting means shall be installed in accordance with 230.70 A1 through 3. Readily accessible location. Let's talk about readily accessible. Now that one is interesting, and it bears a lot here. It's in Article 100, definitions. Accessible readily. Capable of being reached quickly for operation, renewal, or inspections without requiring those to whom ready access is requisite to take actions such as to use tools other than keys, to climb over or under, to remove obstacles, or to resort to portable ladders, and so forth. Hey guys, if you've got comments, drop it in here. I'm watching the comments. If things come in, we'll start chatting about it. Okay, so this is interesting. Let's get really just picky for a second. You've all seen this. Customer's got a meter outside. Immediately inside there's the main panel. The main disconnecting means that what we're talking about right here is located in the main panel, and there's a picture over the panel because it's in the living room and they wanted to dress it up. Technically, that could be considered a violation of readily accessible if you're being extremely picky. Now, we all live in the real world. I'm not going to flag a customer for putting a picture over the panel just to dress up their living room, right? I'm not going to win that battle for one. There's nobody's going to listen to me. They're going to be like, yeah, as soon as you're out of here, that picture goes right back where it was. But it's more significant than that. It's got to be, it can't be too high, such that you've got to pull out a portable 2-foot, 6-foot ladder, whatever, to get up and reach it. Max height is 6'7" when it's in the up or on position. And it can't be, now there's another interesting one here, and this one actually does get violated, and people kind of get it, but actions shall not be required, such as to use tools other than keys to access it. Well, let me paint this for you. Sometimes the utility will put a padlock on an exterior disconnect, a main disconnect. That is key accessed. Cool, totally get it. But I don't have that key. Nobody gave me a copy. I'm the homeowner, I'm the business owner, I'm the dwelling occupant. I don't have now access to my main disconnect, my exterior disconnect. And if I've got a main lug panel, I've got no way of de-energizing power without cutting off the utility lock. Mildly frustrating. Here's the reality. If you put your lock on the utility equipment, they'll cut it off without they will not stop, hesitate, or question. They'll cut it right off. If you need to access your equipment, generally speaking, you're allowed, as long as it's your equipment, and that definition needs to be understood in your jurisdiction, our jurisdiction. If you put a lock, or utilities put a lock on equipment, you're permitted to cut it off, and there will not be repercussion unless there's meter tampering or some extremely unsafe condition, like booby trapping or something insane, you know? And so we've got quite a bit of latitude right here in the heart of central Indiana to de-energize services ourselves to cut overhead lines. They won't let us get into their pedestals or transformers. Oh man, oh shoot, this was crazy. There was one time, I still can't quite believe this. I'm fuzzy on the details. There was one time there was a ground mount utility transformer in a residential distribution setting. It was servicing 3 homes. And we're bringing in a new underground service, running the pipe from the customer's house to the transformer as prescribed. Our contact at the utility told us, no, we want you to bring that conduit, that 4-inch PVC conduit, up into that transformer, up into a live transformer. And our young electrician on the job, more or less an advanced apprentice, was running that pipe, and by golly, he got it done. But how terrifying is that? That was wrong information. The policy is that we should have stopped 5 feet from the transformer and not brought that conduit up and into, hand dug underneath the transformer in order to route that conduit up and turn a 90 into the transformer with energized conductors and an insane amount of power. That woo! Wow, that was misinformation, and we were able to track down the right information and not do that again. Wow. Okay, so more external disconnecting means, service equipment disconnecting means, cannot be located in bathrooms, can be remote controlled. Now you don't usually see that. I don't know that I've ever encountered that, but there's a remote control device that is identified as service disconnecting means, but it is an electronic method of control for disconnecting means, which would be located inside a premises. For instance, more typical of industrial establishments. I'd love to hear if you see those, if you've got a good product for remote control disconnecting means, because there are some applications where that would save us hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. I'd love to know if you have encountered those personally as a residential, commercial, or industrial electrical inspector or engineer. And I'd like to know what their most common application is. So if you can help me out, drop in the comments. Let's engage there. And then of course marking. It ought to be marked, labeled. Each service disconnect shall be permanently marked to identify it as a service disconnect. Suitable for use. Each service disconnecting means shall be suitable for the prevailing conditions. Okay, so that's a wide variety of things, and I think that would be potentially corrosive atmosphere if you're on the coastal areas and you have salt air. That's going to be particularly corrosive to electrical equipment. You might need to make a transition from a NEMA 3R enamel disconnect to maybe a NEMA 4X stainless steel disconnect that's now going to provide protection for the internal components from corrosive, humid air, and not just from rainfall. And so you've got to consider what's going to abrade this installation, and it needs to be durable. Here's another thought for you. One of the applications would be suitable protection. For instance, our utility will require an 8-inch bollard, yellow painted bollard. That's a steel pipe filled with concrete set, I think it's 3 to 4 feet in the ground, to protect that equipment when it's exposed to vehicular traffic. Now, one exception to that is I was able to put a parking bumper in front of one, and it created a real nice parking spot. It had a lower aesthetic impact because those bollards, they're 8 inches wide, they're bright yellow, they're 4 to 5 feet high, and they're not always the most friendly, they don't create atmosphere for a coffee shop, if you will. And so definitely want to be thinking about that. Another comment here. So James, appreciate your contribution there. Agree with you, rigid and the right conduit type to protect your service conductors. Really important to understand that. Okay, we've got Henry Thomas. He says, timestamp, love it, 2812. Solar panels only generate DC power? What? All my panels have mini inverters and output only AC. So rectifier is not used. I've had these for several years now. I really like what you're doing with bringing outlets out the rear of the panel. Then other comments. Okay, so yes, solar power is strictly DC power. However, you're totally right. There are multiple types of products, and I'll give you the skinny on those anatomies here real quick. that invert. Rectifying is then going back from AC to DC. So they invert power from the panels to the grid power. And they can do that by means of a central inverter, which tends to be an inverter that is like a megawatt, like massive power, or hundreds of kilowatts, a very large industrial or very large commercial type installation. If that inverter goes down, you're losing hundreds or thousands of dollars a day in solar generation revenue. Then you've got string inverters, which really own a pretty good share of the market, and have for a long time. They've been around for a long time. They've overcome the problems of rapid shutdown, although I think not always in the best of ways. So string inverters are going to be anything from like a little 3 kilowatt string inverter, that's the smallest one for solar edge, all the way up to 100, and even I think there might even be up to 150 kilowatt string inverters. Like they're quite large, 166 kilowatts maybe. And then you've got the hybrid system where you've got like solar edge. You've got the optimizer that does DC to DC conversions at the panel, and you've got the string inverter, which handles that broad range of 3 kilowatts to 150 kilowatts of inversion. And so you've taken the components that are in a standard inverter, you've split them into 2 locations, you're optimizing the mathematical equation, and you're minimizing the cost of repairs functionally too. And then you've got the microinverter system and variations on it. Some microinverters are actually married into the back of the panel. It's an all-in-one. It's been manufactured together. It's a microinverter company that is now paired with a solar panel manufacturing company. They've integrated the technology in an inseparable manner. There are no serviceable parts between the two, and they're performing the all-in-one function right there on the roof. And so you actually functionally get more or less a 12.3 Romex cable coming off your roof, and that's typically what people will use, maybe a 10.3 in some cases, but I think predominantly a 12.3. And that's taking AC power right through the home, just like walk in the park. It's a vacuum cleaner circuit is what it is at that point. And then sometimes those are separated, where the microinverter is mounted to the rail and the solar panel is then laid on top of that and plugged into that as a separate component. That allows a little bit more servicing. I will say the most costly option still right now, last price check I did, was the integrated model, where each manufacturer is bringing their product together. You have one specific configuration. So you get customers who have all kinds of ideas about solar panels. For instance, you've got, it's got to be American made, it's got to be tier 1, it's got to be UL listed, it's got to be, and mind you, I love all of those things. I'm just saying not everybody's on the same page. It's got to be UL listed, it's got to be, I'm going to buy discount modules. I bought off an insurance claim. We actually bought off an insurance claim one time, put a bunch of modules on our house. What happened was there's a field full of solar panels. They were all damaged, not all actually. Many were damaged in a hailstorm. The insurance company did not process any kind of investigation to determine which modules were good and which were not. There are a bunch of pallets of modules that were still stacked in place. And so we bought pallets of solar panels at like less than 50 cents on the dollar, and the only one was damaged was the top one. The whole thing's still palletized, top module smashed, everything underneath was perfectly fine, so great deal on that. So people will buy fire sales and deals of all kinds, and so when you only have one option, or maybe let's say this too, you've got black on black, you've got white on black, that refers to the coloring of the solar panels. You've got cells of panels that sometimes they're blue, sometimes they're black, sometimes you get variation in a batch. I hate that. There's so much pain when you ship 33 palletized modules out the door on a solar project, and you expect them to be installed and the job to be done, and you're 2.5 hours from home, and come to find out there's a mixed bag. You've got some with a blue purple coloration besides some with a black coloration. The cell, the silicon cell, it's never going to fly on a customer's roof. That's never okay. And so we've had some pain around that. There's product abnormalities. But you've got a wide range of factors that people are making a solar panel selection. When you've got one option, one microinverter option, it's very limiting, and it comes with the highest cost. but I get it. It's fun to get AC power right off your roof. You don't have anything mounted on the walls of your garage or your basement. It's real clean. All the technology is up and tucked away out of sight. It's a quicker installation from a labor standpoint. You're not taking two devices, installing them separately, piecing them together, and doing cable management, right? The design configuration has been taken care of for you. And because there are limitations, I'll tell you one story. Oh, so much pain. We used, and if you know solar, some of you are going to see where this is going. We used Panasonic 96 cell solar module. We use that all the time. We're like #1 in the Midwest for Panasonic. However, there is an update in the solar panel. We were doing a recent update because Panasonic went from the 60 cell, this was like 3 or 4 years ago, the 60 cell to the 96, I believe, the split cells. And we were doing a bicycle shop here in Indianapolis. And it's something, I want to say something like a 30, 40 kilowatt project, sizable. We used in the SolarEdge optimizer system. And unfortunately, because the open circuit voltage of the solar panels was so high, it exceeded the voltage of the optimizers, the operating voltage of the optimizers, and it was over voltaging and doing an auto shutdown. And so we had to take all the modules up, panels up. We had to replace all the optimizers. We threw all the old optimizers away, put all the panels back down. We're talking like 8-10 grand later, we're good to go. So when someone else, and we learned that lesson and referenced the compatibility charts, and man, we just got moving too fast. But when someone else does the compatibility and configuration for you, you're shifting the liability elsewhere, and you're buying a ready-made product, right? There's tremendous advantage to that. So if you're a DIYer doing your own project, I would highly recommend an integrated microinverter panel technology. The other part there is failure. If something fails, both parts fail, right? You're replacing both, but the warranty should cover that. Just understand the terms of your warranty. With Panasonic, there's a triple guard warranty. So they're paying for the module, the labor. They are warranting for 25 years, both production and product, like really phenomenal terms. Whew. Okay, here's a good one. David S. Dude, appreciate your comments. David says, I think it's unfair. This is in reference to the correcting an electrical commercial ... residence, ? I think it is unfair to apply today's codes to a 40 or 50-year-old house. In my case, I've always lived in 100-year-old homes. Get where you're coming from, David. Most houses are grandfathered. No house would pass an inspection since electrical codes change every 3 years. That's why cars that are older than 20 years are exempt from inspection in Virginia, if you apply for it. Really interesting comment. Man, this is gonna be heated. You guys are gonna get after this. Here's the deal. What's your objective? Right? David, I see that you're coming to the table. I perceive, maybe I'm wrong, that you're coming to the table with an objective of maintaining reasonable cost effectiveness for budget-oriented people, right? Swapping out a panel is, in an easy situation. The floor, the basic cost for a little sub panel mounted on the surface of the basement wall with only a couple of circuits, like $600 for starters. But that goes way up. Let's say you've got a 4060 that's gone bad and it's embedded in the wall. There's drywall, there's circuits coming out of the top, bottom, sides. You could have 2 personnel all day from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. get that thing fully transferred. Let's say it's not even labeled. So you're doing all the labels. It's just a massive working day, and I've done too many of those. 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. You're paying a team of 2, $200 an hour, 150, 200, 225 an hour, and it's a 14-hour workday plus materials and markup on those materials. You do the math. I mean, you could spend 3 or 4 grand easily on a panel upgrade. Now you throw the requirement for AFCI protection in there, and now you're up from 4 grand to 5 grand or 6 grand. You've got to have plug-on neutral panel. You've got to have specialty breakers. You can't use the tandems anymore because you've got this AFCI requirement. And dude, you're up to 5, 6 grand. You're adding a sub panel, create space for everything. I get it. What's your objective? That's one of the key questions to ask every inspector when you're in a conversation is understand their objective. And really at this point we shouldn't have to ask. Building inspectors, safety. Safety of the occupant, that's it. That's all they're worried about. It's budget. You'll get a reasonable guy who'll kind of help you navigate a situation to arrive at a budget sometimes. Most of the time, they do not care. They do not care. And so, understand their objective. They're not here to help your business run profitably. It's not even, didn't even enter their mind this morning, right? When they were eating breakfast, they were thinking about the safety of the occupant. And so, budget is regardless. The code updates every 3 years because inspectors and code panels and everyone else wants people to be safe. They want to protect life and property. And so that grandfathering clause, you know, if you're on a budget, if you can't get it done, if it's impracticable, it's worth throwing that one out there. But I will say, I think there is less sympathy among building inspectors as we go along and the authorities that be, because there is such, our society values safety above all else. And so the budget, the practical argument, it falls apart. You know, if you know someone who's been, like my brother-in-law's cousin, right, killed by a semi-truck, he's all about self-driving Teslas, semi-trucks. He's like, get those babies on the road. Like, there's so much risk. I've experienced so much pain, you know, over this type of loss. And you know, some people who've experienced that over GFCI protection or improper bonding of water pipes and metallic piping systems. Like, we know these stories. We've all heard these stories. Like, what would you give to go back and correct that? Like, there's just not a lot of sympathy for the grandfathering clause. I'm telling you, I think you can try to pull that card out sometimes, but there's just a lot of biting the bullet and spending the money as a homeowner, and if you don't want to do it, rent. I do have some sympathy for you, David. I'm not heartless, but gotta balance it out. Okay, here's a good one. Jesse Estrada. I love your profile pic, dude. I don't know what's going on there, but you're all blue. It's cool. It might be mask. Jesse says, you guys, us, yeah, we do all kinds of electric vehicle charging, like 3 to 10 a week, right? With this massive infrastructure bill, jumping on that one. You guys are the reason our environment is still polluted. You have any idea what kind of pollution is done from coal burning to produce your extra electricity you need to charge those EVs? Y'all not really helping the cause, really. Y'all just buy these cars just to save money on gas. But it's a shame because y'all business and can get that gas money back from Uncle Sam. Just say no to EVs. Okay, Jesse, I disagree with you on this one. I appreciate your comment though. Here's the deal. Elon Musk has a great description on this, and I bought it hook, line, and sinker. If you're an engineer or disagree with this, let me know. But here's the deal. When you combust fossil fuel at a plant, there are no restrictions on weight, size, or cost, right? If a coal plant needs to spend $46 million on an air scrubber that turns the base particles into captured dust, steam, and other things like that, the pollutants into recyclable materials, or at least captures the pollutants, they're gonna do it, right? $46 million is nothing for a coal plant. If it needs to be a 12-ton apparatus, they're gonna do it. If it needs, you know, if it's a, you know, let's say 1,000 cubic feet, right? They're gonna do it. Like, none of these restrictions are valid restrictions. But when we burn fossil fuels at a vehicle that costs $20,000 to $80,000, right? All the restrictions are there: size, weight, and cost. And so what I'm telling you is there's no way that the efficiency of the unit that's in your vehicle can match the technology, the efficiency, the size, the weight, and the cost of the air scrubber that is the exhaust, right? That's at the power plant. There's no way. And in fact, it's scientifically very unequal. I don't know what the metric is, but it's dramatically apart. So that would be my biggest argument there is, yes, currently electricity has, generated through fossil fuels, has a byproduct to it. Nobody's denying that. But that byproduct is substantially diminished at a plant as opposed to at the vehicle, at the tailpipe. Secondly, electricity is being transitioned dramatically across the entire planet towards renewables. And so that byproduct is being substantially diminished. In fact, there are countries on this planet that have 100% renewable goals as aggressive and early as 2030, maybe even 2025, like crazy goals, where 100% of their energy is going to come from renewable sources. Now, whether they're going to achieve those goals or not by 2030 is neither here nor there. The fact is they're going to make tremendous progress and they're going to bring the pollutant levels way down. And so, Jesse, I've heard that argument before. Challenged you there. Still want to be friends. No harm done. I've got a Spanish comment here I'm going to have to work on interpreting. Sorry, I can't help you out right now. And it looks like there's one that came in like Latvian. I have no idea what that is. Got definitely an international keyboard going on here. Okay, so Lance says, are electrical contractors allowed to cut the service drop from AES to do work on meter mast, then splice back the service drop, also without permit and tag? Lance, the answer is no. Permit and tag, absolutely required. Some people get confused here too, right? I've done it 1,000 times, right? Well, done it and not been caught. That's the reality. We upgrade lots of services. That's a multiple times weekly project at Jefferson Electric across our 50+ team members. And we see lots of handyman jobs that have been done before us. And we can tell when it was reconnected by AES, the utility company, and when it was not. The difference is outdoor rated splices properly crimped on 3 or even 6 sides, depending on the style of crimp, and good stripped connection, no exposed electrical connections, copper wire, etc. And the other side of that is an indoor rated splice, like a split bolt, wrapped in electrical tape, a dielectric union or junction where the aluminum the aluminum utility wire has been spliced to the copper premises wire, so it's got all kinds of corrosion taking place. The electrical tape is unraveling, withering, deteriorating. It's just ugly. And when that happens to your neutral in particular, you get 240-volt syndrome inside and things start to blow, like literally TVs start to blow off the wall. No exaggeration. So AES, just like any company, has, 600 to 2,600 employees. I have no idea, maybe more. And you're gonna get a variety of answers based upon who you ask. Not everybody has all the information. AES linemen generally will allow you to disconnect an overhead service. If they come out and find that you've created a hazardous situation for others, they're going to be ticked. Like, you're going to hear it. You might, I don't know which, I've never had a fine, fee, penalty, or anything else from AES. I've never had it, and I don't want it. I'll tell you one more story where I made a misstep, and I maybe should have had it. But as long as you're a qualified electrician, you've disconnected it, you've called for a disconnect. Now, the lineman could take 8 hours to get out there, and you're like, I can't wait 8 hours to start my job in the service upgrade, right? The new equipment is going back where the old equipment was. Like, I got nothing to do until this comes down and gets taken apart. So they'll allow you to disconnect it. In fact, sometimes usually the linemen are like, thanks, bro, because I did his job for him, because he was late, and they'll drive off and they'll wait for you to call for the reconnect. But it's real important that you understand the rules around the disconnect. So Duke Energy requires calling to schedule a disconnect multiple days in advance. You're not going to get same-day service unless it's an emergency, or you get lucky. AES is the morning of, and then you get a 1 to 3 hour window. Every utility is going to be different. We were in a jurisdiction that we had not done work in before. We called same day for a reconnect of power after disconnecting it, and found out that the local inspector has got to inspect and tag the metering equipment. He gets off at like 3:30 p.m. Right? He probably starts his day at 7. gets off at 3:30 p.m. So you have to have the service upgrade installed and complete before 3:30, or he's not coming out to tag your equipment. That's aggressive. That's fast. Like usually we're working until 4, 5, 6 p.m. on these service upgrades, and the utility company won't come out to reconnect power until they receive notice from the county inspector. And so we were getting, like, literally our option, we were staring down the barrel of a gun. The customer's going to be without power all night. Nothing was going to happen tonight. We were told that by the utility. We were told that by the inspector. And I was literally just praying, like, I don't want to have to face this. Like, it's definitely our fault. We did not understand the protocol for that county between the building department and the utility company. And for some reason we had mercy, and the utility company showed up and reconnected service, and we never, well, I don't know why. maybe the homeowner knew somebody, maybe strings were pulled. I never heard why. I don't know why, but it worked. And here's the deal, that utility company is gonna, usually they're large enough, they work across multiple counties, they're going to comply with the local building authority. So if that process is different for the local building authority, from county to county to county, you could have one utility company that you have, like Duke, they're huge. They're like second or third largest utility company in the United States. They're right here in central Indiana. You could have 50 or 100 different experiences in Duke territory based upon the city, the county, the inspector, all the different flavors that takes. I'll tell you another story, or I probably should have gotten dinged with the utility company. The rules for calling 811 before you dig. That's what it's called in our area. 811. Call before you dig. Know what's below. It's totally your responsibility as the contractor. I'll tell you 2 stories. And dang, man, I was terrified. We called 811 in plenty of time. 48 hours is the local notice required. 2 working days. We called in plenty of time. What I didn't understand is that different utilities get marked by different locators. I'm like never present when locators are doing their thing. They're always there, a day or 2 or a week in advance. And so I didn't understand that the locators don't, like, you'll have multiple locators to a site. This locator will do water and sewer and gas. This locator will do cable and electric. That locator will do petroleum pipelines. You got different types of things happening. I don't know all the rhyme and reason. I just know that's the way it is in our area. And so I looked on the ground, and it's so hard to read. These guys are sloppy. They're writing like literally with spray paint in the grass at the end of a wand, and the grass has grown up. And so I'm trying to read this, and there's a blue flag, yellow flag, green flag. It means water, sewer, gas is okay. Water, gas is yellow, sewer is green. Everything has a color coding. Orange is data, red is electric. I don't know if that's universal across the country. I'd be interested in your thoughts on that. And the electric had not been marked. And so we take a 48-inch ride-on trencher to the backyard of our customer's home. We put the blade in that trencher, start it up, put it right in the ground. I've got one of my team members on that trencher. I'm in the front yard, and it's the weirdest thing. It's like this, bro. This is my customer's utility pole. It's inside their fence. This is their house. We're gonna trench like this to the meter cabinet right there. The other home is probably 100, 150 feet away. We put that blade of that trencher right into the ground, and man, lo and behold, this customer's utility line, the riser pole was right there. I would have thought it would have been something like this. No, bro, it was crazy. I don't know if they hit underground obstacles or what, but it was like that. It was this big swoop. The underground power line to this customer's home, all their power swept through this customer's backyard. So we put that trencher blade right on the ground. It's unmarked, not because it's not going to be marked, but because that locator who's responsible for electric and data hadn't been out yet. I didn't know it. Put the blade in the ground. Boom! Those conductors were about 18 inches deep as opposed to the 36 required by code. Now, probably would have hit them anyways because we were going about 36-40. And man, we just nailed them. There was this massive boom. I'm standing in the front yard. I'm like, whoa, something literally just blew up. And my 2 guys come walking up. They're white-faced. They're like, We just hit the electric utility. The neighbor next door is coming out. They're like, all my power just went out, and I heard a boom. What's going on? And here I am like, I don't know. I'm lead man. We're sorting through it. And probably 30 minutes later, the locator for the electric utility shows up. He's like, you guys digging already? I haven't done the locates. We're like, yeah, we know. Thanks a lot for being late. Behind that 48-hour time window. But guess what? It's still the responsibility of the contractor, you and me, to ensure that the utilities are located and not to dig prior to the complete locating of the utilities. It's our liability, it's on us. Though the utility company came out, they restored power, they had a line crew out there. It probably took like 2 to 3 hours in a vac truck. They vacked everything out with, so if you haven't seen that, they blast water, high pressure water at the ground. It's at the right pressure to remove the soil, but not to damage the conductors. And then they take a vacuum and they suck up all the mud. So literally they roll out at the start of the day with a truck full of water, or tank full of water, and they roll back at the end of the day with a truck full of mud, and they dump it, rinse and repeat, literally. And so, man, we didn't, I was expecting like a bill for the line crew, like, 3-4 linemen in a vac truck for 3 hours. That could have been a $2,800 bill, $3,500 bill. I never heard another word about it. They just fixed it and rolled on down. So I got lucky on that one too. Whew, had me sweating. All right, we're gonna call a break here. Subscribe to Electric Pro Academy for real skills